Let me help you with that, Mama.
Thank you so much, my son.
Hold it like this.
Oh yeah, I'll try.
You are good to go.
The morning sun rose gently over a peaceful neighborhood in Calabar, Cross River State, as women swept their compounds, traders arranged vegetables on wooden tables, and children ran along the road laughing as they played with an old tire. Among the familiar faces in that neighborhood was a young man named Gabriel. He was only 18 years old, but almost everyone knew him, not because his family was wealthy or influential, but because Gabriel had a habit of helping people without waiting to be asked. That morning, an elderly woman was struggling with a heavy basket of vegetables when Gabriel noticed her. He immediately walked over, lifted the basket, and carried it to her stall. The woman smiled and told him, "God bless you, my son." Gabriel simply smiled and replied that it was nothing. Before he could walk away, another neighbor called him to help with a damaged gate, and without hesitation, Gabriel went over. That was the kind of person Gabriel had always been. If an elderly widow needed help fetching water, he helped her. If the neighborhood children damaged their bicycles, they brought them to him. If someone needed directions, Gabriel would sometimes walk part of the way with them, just to make sure they did not get lost. He played football with the younger boys, greeted his elders respectfully, and rarely passed anyone without smiling. Gabriel's family was not rich. They lived a simple life in a modest home, but there was love in that house. Most evenings, Gabriel sat with his parents during dinner, listening to stories, laughing and talking about everything that had happened during the day. He did not have much, but he was happy. Some people seem to enter the world with hearts that are naturally gentle, and Gabriel was one of those people. Everyone trusted him because kindness seemed to follow him wherever he went. Even when he had very little, Gabriel always found something he could give. One Christmas, his elder brother Samuel returned home from Abuja. Samuel had been living there for several years and had built a stable business for himself. During his visit, he watched Gabriel closely and noticed how responsible his younger brother had become. He saw the way people greeted him, the way elders trusted him, and the way Gabriel never seemed afraid of hard work. One evening, Samuel sat with him outside the family home and told him that he had grown into a responsible young man. Gabriel smiled and said he was trying. Samuel then made an offer that Gabriel had never expected. He asked him to come to Abuja and learn his trade. Gabriel was surprised. He had never lived away from home, and Abuja seemed very far from everything he knew. His mother was worried too, but Samuel reassured the family that Gabriel would stay with him and that he would personally look after him. Their father asked Gabriel what he wanted. After thinking about it, Gabriel said he wanted to go. His mother became emotional, but Gabriel held her hand and promised that he would return. He told her he wanted to work hard and become someone the family could be even more proud of. His father smiled and reminded him that they were already proud of him. A few days later, Gabriel stood at the motor park with his family. Everything he owned could fit into one traveling bag. His mother hugged him tightly, his father prayed for him, and Samuel prepared their luggage for the journey. Then Gabriel noticed Rose standing a short distance away. Rose had grown up in the same neighborhood. She and Gabriel had known each other for years, and as they became older, their friendship slowly developed into a romantic relationship. Rose tried to hide her sadness as Gabriel walked toward her. She asked him if he was really leaving, and Gabriel told her that he had to go. She made him promise that he would not forget her and that one day he would return. Gabriel held her hands and reassured her that he was not leaving forever. He told her he was going away because he wanted to build a better future, perhaps a future for both of them. When the driver called the passengers to board, Gabriel reluctantly released Rose's hands and entered the bus. As the vehicle pulled away, he looked back through the window. Rose remained standing beside the road until the bus disappeared from sight. When Gabriel arrived in Abuja, the city fascinated him. The roads were wider, the buildings were taller, traffic moved faster, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Abuja was bigger, busier, and more expensive than the world Gabriel had known, but he was not afraid of hard work. He believed that if he worked hard enough and remained honest, he could make something of himself. Samuel welcomed him into his home, and Samuel's wife and children treated him like part of their immediate family. Then the real work began. Every morning, Gabriel woke before sunrise and followed Samuel to the shop. At first, he made mistakes. He sometimes calculated prices incorrectly, misunderstood customers, or needed Samuel to correct him several times. But Gabriel never allowed embarrassment to stop him from learning. He listened carefully, observed how Samuel handled customers, asked questions, and practiced until he understood. He learned how to negotiate with suppliers, keep proper business records, manage difficult customers, and protect himself from bad deals. He worked long hours and saved every naira he could. Months became years, and slowly, customers stopped seeing Gabriel simply as Samuel's younger brother. They began to trust him on his own merit. Some customers would enter the shop and specifically ask for Gabriel because they knew he would not cheat them. One woman once told Samuel that she preferred Gabriel to attend to her because he was honest. Another customer joked that Gabriel would tell someone the truth, even if the truth meant he made less money. His greatest advertisement was not the business, it was his character. After 3 years, Samuel called Gabriel aside one evening and congratulated him. Gabriel did not understand what he meant until Samuel explained that his apprenticeship was over. He had learned the trade, proven himself, and was now ready to stand on his own. Gabriel was deeply grateful. Samuel had not only given him an opportunity, he had taught him how to survive in a city that had once frightened him. As Gabriel became more established, people in the Abuja neighborhood where he lived also became fond of him. Children would run toward him whenever he returned from work, shouting, "Uncle Gabriel!" Sometimes he bought biscuits for them. Other times he simply stopped to joke or play with them. Older women greeted him warmly. Young men invited him to sit with them, and even the security guards joked whenever he passed. One elderly woman once told Gabriel that his parents had raised a good man. Gabriel lowered his head respectfully and thanked her. Eventually, Samuel encouraged Gabriel to start his own business. Gabriel was afraid of failing, but Samuel reminded him that failure was not the end. If something went wrong, he could learn from it and begin again. Using his savings, along with some support and guidance from Samuel, Gabriel rented a modest apartment and a small shop. He painted the apartment himself, bought second-hand furniture, and carefully arranged his business. On the morning he received the keys to his shop, Gabriel stood inside the empty space and prayed. For the first time in his life, something significant belonged entirely to him. His home, his shop, his decisions, and his dream were finally his responsibility. His first sale brought him more happiness than the amount of money involved, and after that, the business gradually grew. Customers came because they trusted him, neighbors stopped to greet him, and his laughter became a familiar sound in the street. One customer jokingly told him, "Gabriel, you are too good. Never change." Gabriel laughed and asked, "Why would I?" At that moment, he had no idea how much his life was about to change. One night, Gabriel was sitting alone in his apartment, scrolling through old photographs, when he came across a picture of Rose. He stared at it for a while and smiled. Although several years had passed, he had never completely forgotten her. He called her. The excitement in Rosie's voice was immediate. They spoke for hours, laughing about childhood memories and discussing the people they had grown up with. They talked about their dreams and what the future might look like. Before ending the call, Gabriel invited Rose to Abuja. He wanted her to see the life he had built and spend some time with him. Rose was delighted. Several days later, Gabriel waited anxiously at an Abuja motor park as passengers stepped down from an intercity bus. When he finally saw Rose, she waved excitedly, and Gabriel rushed toward her. They embraced tightly, both of them genuinely happy to see each other again. For Gabriel, it felt as though his past and future had finally met. During Rose's first days in Abuja, everything seemed perfect. Gabriel showed her around the city. They visited parks, ate suya, took photographs, cooked together, prayed together, and spent evenings talking about the future. Sometimes Gabriel looked at Rose and imagined marrying her one day. He imagined children, a peaceful home, and perhaps eventually building a house back in Cross River State. What Gabriel did not know was that some of the greatest storms in life do not arrive with thunder. Sometimes they arrive quietly, wearing the familiar face of someone you trust. Gabriel had always been an early riser. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, prayed, and prepared for work. Sometimes he even made breakfast before leaving. Rose often remained at home during the day while Gabriel worked, and each evening he returned with groceries and whatever else they needed. For a while, everything seemed normal, but slowly, Rose's behavior began to change. One evening, Gabriel casually reminded her that her return ticket to Calabar was for the following week. Rose looked at him and asked, "Return to where?" Gabriel thought she was joking and reminded her that she had originally come only for a visit. Rose calmly told him that she was not going back. Gabriel was confused. Her family was expecting her, and most of her life was still in Calabar, but Rose insisted that she wanted to remain in Abuja and begin a new life with him. What disturbed Gabriel was not simply that Rose wanted to stay. It was the fact that she had made the decision without discussing it with him. That night, he lay awake, wondering what he should do. In the end, he convinced himself that perhaps Rose only wanted to be close to him and that maybe he was worrying unnecessarily. Weeks became months. Gabriel tried to persuade Rose to travel back with him so they could properly discuss their plans with her parents. Rose refused, saying she was an adult and did not need anyone's permission. Gabriel eventually contacted her family himself so that they at least knew she was safe and still living in Abuja. That was also around the time Gabriel started avoiding arguments. Not because he always agreed with Rose, but because Gabriel had spent his life believing that keeping the peace was more important than proving he was right. What he did not yet understand was that peace and surrender were not the same thing. Then Rose discovered that she was pregnant. At the hospital, a nurse congratulated them and told them that Rose was about 8 weeks pregnant. Gabriel was shocked, but his surprise quickly became joy. He was going to become a father. When the neighborhood heard the news, everyone celebrated with him. The women congratulated him, the men shook his hand, and the children danced around him. Gabriel immediately began preparing for the baby. He worked longer hours, saved more money, bought a few baby clothes, and began planning how to create a comfortable space for the child. He read about fatherhood and sometimes stood inside shops, smiling at tiny baby shoes. Gabriel believed becoming parents would bring him and Rose even closer. Instead, the pregnancy marked the beginning of a side of Rose he had never seen before. By the time Rose was about 5 months pregnant, Gabriel had started working overtime because he wanted to save as much money as possible before the baby arrived. One night, he came home late and exhausted. When he entered the kitchen, he saw a sink filled with dirty dishes. Without complaining, he rolled up his sleeves and started washing them. Rose entered the kitchen. Before Gabriel could properly greet her, she slapped him. The plate in his hand fell and shattered. Gabriel froze. He slowly touched his cheek and asked her why she had hit him. Rose shouted that he had returned home too late and left her alone, despite knowing that she was pregnant. Gabriel tried to explain that he had been working extra hours because they needed money for the baby, but before he could finish, Rose slapped him again, this time harder. Gabriel stood there in shock as Rose walked away. His cheek hurt, but what frightened him most was not the physical pain, it was the fact that he did not know what he was supposed to do next. Rose had never hit him before. Gabriel told himself it was probably the pregnancy. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe her emotions were affecting her. Maybe she had not meant it. Maybe it would never happen again. He explained the incident away because accepting the truth was more frightening. But it did happen again. During another argument, Rose threw a cup that narrowly missed him. Another time, she pushed him against a wall. She insulted him for minor mistakes and once grabbed his shirt so violently that it tore. Gabriel never hit her back. Not once. At the shop one afternoon, Gabriel's apprentice noticed a mark on his neck and asked what had happened. Gabriel quickly adjusted his collar and claimed that he had accidentally hit himself against a door. The apprentice nodded, but Gabriel could tell that he did not believe the explanation. Still, Gabriel said nothing. He tried speaking to Rose privately. He begged her to stop the constant fighting and reminded her that they were about to become parents. Rose mocked him. She called him useless and told him that if she did not shout at him, nothing would ever get done. Every insult slowly damaged Gabriel's confidence. Every act of aggression removed another piece of the cheerful young man people once knew. Yet Gabriel remained silent because he was ashamed. He was a grown man, and he could not imagine telling people that the woman he loved was hitting him. Would anybody believe him? Would they help him or laugh at him? Would they ask why he did not defend himself? Would they tell him that a real man should be able to control his woman? Gabriel did not want to find out. So he kept everything to himself. Slowly, Rose began isolating him from other people. One evening, some men in the neighborhood were watching football outside when they called Gabriel to join them. Before he could answer, Rose appeared and ordered him to come inside. The men exchanged uncomfortable looks. Gabriel obeyed. The moment the door closed, Rose accused him of wanting to waste time with useless friends. Gabriel explained that the men had only greeted him, but Rose told him that the next time they called him, he should ignore them. When Gabriel reminded her that they were his neighbors, Rose pushed him and demanded to know whether he understood her. Gabriel quietly said yes. That night, he once again convinced himself that perhaps Rose was just stressed. Maybe she would change after the baby arrived. Maybe motherhood would calm her. Maybe things would return to the way they used to be. Maybe. Without realizing it, the word maybe had become Gabriel's prison. Months later, Rose went into labor. Despite everything that had happened between them, Gabriel stayed beside her at the hospital and supported her through the delivery. After several exhausting hours, the cry of a newborn baby filled the room. The doctor congratulated them and announced that they had a beautiful baby girl. Gabriel began to cry. When the nurse placed the baby into his arms, Gabriel stared at her as if nothing else existed. He named her Christy. As he kissed his daughter's forehead, he silently promised that he would protect her no matter what happened. For a short time, hope returned. Gabriel loved being a father. He changed diapers, carried Christy around the house, sang to her, fed her, rocked her to sleep, and helped Rose whenever he could. He worked during the day and still cared for the baby at night. Sometimes he was so tired that he fell asleep, sitting upright with Christy against his chest. He rarely complained. Christy became the brightest part of Gabriel's life. Unfortunately, her birth did not end Rose's abusive behavior. It became worse. Rose started checking Gabriel's phone and questioning every call. She wanted to know where every naira went. She repeatedly called him while he was working and sometimes demanded that he leave the shop and return home immediately. If he refused, there would be another argument. Gradually, Gabriel's business began to suffer. He started closing earlier. Customers sometimes arrived and found the shop locked. His apprentice became concerned. Gabriel also stopped spending time with people in the neighborhood. Children would run toward him, and he would find an excuse to keep walking. Friends would greet him, and he would simply nod. People noticed the change. One evening, two women watched Gabriel walk past and commented that he was no longer the cheerful man they remembered. They noticed that he rarely greeted anyone and that the change seemed to have started after Rose moved to Abuja. Some men assumed the problem was financial. Others quietly suspected that something was wrong inside Gabriel's home. They were right. One evening, Gabriel stood beside his apartment window, watching people laugh outside. Children played, men joked, and women talked. Life continued only a few meters away, yet Gabriel felt completely separated from it. Rose stood behind him. Neither of them spoke. The silence inside the apartment felt heavier than shouting. Everyone could see that Gabriel had changed, but nobody knew exactly why. Some prisons do not have bars. Some prisons are built from fear. Eventually, Samuel began to notice. One afternoon, he visited Gabriel's shop unexpectedly. He looked around and immediately saw that the business was not doing as well as before. Some shelves were half empty, there were fewer customers, and Gabriel himself looked exhausted. Samuel asked what was happening. Gabriel quickly blamed the economy and said business was simply slow. Samuel studied him carefully and asked if he was really okay. Gabriel insisted that he was. But Samuel reminded him that he hardly called anymore, rarely visited, and always seemed nervous whenever Samuel came to his house. Gabriel forced a smile and told him that he was imagining things. Samuel did not believe him, but Gabriel was not ready to talk. When Gabriel returned home that evening, Rose already knew Samuel had visited the shop. She immediately demanded to know what Gabriel had told his brother. Gabriel said they had only talked about business. Rose warned him never to discuss their relationship with his family. When Gabriel did not respond quickly enough, Rose grabbed his shirt and began threatening him, but Christy started crying before the argument could go further. Gabriel immediately went to his daughter. Christy also became another reason he used to justify staying. Gabriel told himself that leaving Rose would destroy his daughter's family. He believed enduring the situation was a sacrifice he had to make for Christy. He did not understand that children could also be harmed by growing up in a home filled with fear, aggression, and constant tension. One afternoon, Samuel came to see him again. The two brothers stood outside beside Samuel's car, talking quietly. Several neighbors were nearby. Suddenly, Rose stormed out of the compound and shouted Gabriel's name. She ordered him to come inside immediately. Samuel calmly told Rose that Gabriel was speaking with him. Rose replied sharply that she was not talking to Samuel. The entire area became quiet. Gabriel was deeply embarrassed. Samuel looked at him, waiting for him to say something, but Gabriel lowered his head and simply told his brother that he would call him later. Then he followed Rose inside. Samuel remained outside. For the first time, his concern became serious suspicion. That night, Rose accused Gabriel of embarrassing her in front of the neighborhood. Gabriel was exhausted and begged her to leave the discussion until the next day. When he tried to walk away, Rose grabbed his arm. Gabriel gently removed her hand and told her he did not want to argue. Rose pushed him. Gabriel stumbled backward against a chair. Then they heard crying. Christy was standing nearby. Their little girl had seen everything. Gabriel looked toward her. Rose, still angry, raised her hand again. Christy screamed, "Mommy, no!" Both adults froze. Christy ran toward Gabriel and wrapped her tiny arms around his leg. Then she looked at Rose and cried, "Don't beat Daddy." Something changed inside Gabriel at that moment. He had tolerated the insults. He had tolerated the humiliation. He had tolerated the pushing, slapping, and fear. He had convinced himself that remaining silent was protecting his daughter. But now, Christy could see everything. Gabriel suddenly understood that the situation was no longer affecting only him. His daughter was growing up inside the same fear. Later that night, Gabriel locked himself in the bathroom and called Samuel. His hands were trembling. When Samuel answered and asked what was wrong, Gabriel tried to speak, but no words came out. Samuel calmly told him to talk to him. Gabriel finally whispered, "Brother, I need help." Then, for the first time, he told someone the truth. He told Samuel about the first slap, the insults, the pushing, the threats, the controlling behavior, and the fear he had been carrying for so long. Samuel listened. He did not laugh. He did not insult him. He did not ask why he had allowed a woman to hit him. He simply listened. The following morning, with Samuel's support and after ensuring that the immediate situation was safe, Gabriel left the apartment temporarily. Because Christy had witnessed the violence and Gabriel was concerned about her well-being, the families became involved immediately. Samuel helped Gabriel contact both families so that the matter could be handled responsibly, and Christy would not be caught in the middle of their conflict. For some time, Gabriel stayed with Samuel while the two families tried to understand what had been happening. Rose initially denied that anything serious had occurred. She accused Gabriel of exaggerating and insisted that couples sometimes fought, but Gabriel refused to return to the same situation. For the first time, he stopped trying to explain away what had happened. The relationship eventually ended. Arrangements concerning Christy were handled with the involvement of their families, and Gabriel remained actively present in his daughter's life. Whatever disagreements existed between him and Rose, Gabriel was determined that Christy would never be used as a weapon between them. Leaving the relationship did not magically repair Gabriel. Freedom was not the same thing as healing. For a long time, he struggled to sleep properly. Sudden shouting made him tense. Unexpected phone calls frightened him. Sometimes he questioned whether he had done the right thing. On difficult days, he even remembered the happy moments he and Rose once shared and wondered how something that had started with so much love had become so painful. But Samuel remained beside him. Slowly, Gabriel began opening up to trusted family members. He returned to work. He rebuilt relationships with old customers. He started spending time with people again. One evening, when the neighborhood children saw him walking home, they ran toward him shouting, "Uncle Gabriel!" For the first time in a long time, Gabriel did not avoid them. He stopped, smiled, and hugged them. His recovery did not happen overnight. Gabriel rebuilt himself in the same way he had once built his business, one small piece at a time. He eventually learned that asking for help did not make him weak. Talking about abuse did not make him less of a man, and walking away from a harmful relationship did not mean that he had failed. Sometimes leaving was the decision that prevented something worse from happening. Years passed. Gabriel's business recovered and then expanded. He moved into a larger shop and eventually employed several young people. He trained them patiently because he remembered what Samuel had done for him years earlier. Some of those young men came from difficult homes. Some had very little money or no clear opportunity. Gabriel gave them a chance. The frightened man who once struggled to speak slowly became himself again. His customers returned. His confidence returned. His laughter returned. Yet success was no longer Gabriel's greatest achievement. Getting himself back was. One evening, while Gabriel was sitting in his office, his younger sister called him from Cross River State. She asked him to come home because their parents wanted to see him, and Samuel was already there. Gabriel became worried, but his sister assured him that he simply needed to come. A few days later, Gabriel returned to the family compound in Calabar. As soon as he entered, memories rushed through him. He remembered himself at 18, standing in that same compound with one traveling bag before leaving for Abuja. He remembered his mother crying. He remembered all the dreams he had carried with him. So much had happened since then. His mother embraced him warmly, and his father welcomed him with pride. Samuel was sitting beneath a tree. When Gabriel approached him, Samuel stood. For a moment, the brothers simply looked at one another. Then Samuel told Gabriel that there was something he had wanted to say for years. He apologized. Gabriel was confused and asked what he was apologizing for. Samuel explained that he still felt guilty for not seeing Gabriel's suffering earlier. Gabriel had lived close to him. Samuel had watched him become withdrawn, distant and nervous, yet he had convinced himself that Gabriel would speak when he was ready. Samuel told him, "You were suffering right in front of us, and I did not understand what I was seeing." Tears filled his eyes. Gabriel stepped forward and embraced his brother. He told Samuel that when the day finally came and he found the courage to speak, Samuel had believed him. That was what Gabriel chose to remember. That evening, the family sat together. Gabriel's mother smiled as she watched her children talk. His father laughed. Christy, now older, played nearby with her relatives. Gabriel watched his daughter and felt a kind of peace he had not experienced in years. Healing did not mean he had forgotten what happened. He had not. It simply meant that he refused to allow the darkest period of his life to decide what the rest of his life would become. As time passed, Gabriel decided to turn his experience into something that could help other people. He opened a small community support initiative in Cross River State. The organization supported people going through difficult situations at home and connected vulnerable young people with training and employment opportunities. On the day the initiative officially opened, Gabriel stood before a small gathering. Samuel was there. His parents were there. Christy sat proudly in the front row. Gabriel told the audience that for years he had believed silence made him strong. He had believed that because he was a man, he was supposed to endure whatever happened to him. He thought admitting that he was being abused would cause people to look down on him. Then he told them that he had been wrong. Pain did not care whether the person experiencing it was male or female. Fear did not ask anyone's gender before entering a home. And abuse did not become acceptable simply because the victim was physically stronger than the person hurting them. Gabriel reminded everyone that nobody deserved to live in fear and nobody should feel ashamed for asking for help. As the room filled with applause, Gabriel looked at Christy. His daughter smiled at him. The man who once felt he had nobody to speak to had become someone others could approach for support. The man whose voice had almost disappeared was now using that same voice to remind others that silence was not their only option. Gabriel could have become bitter. He could have become cruel. He could have allowed his experience to destroy everything good inside him. But he chose something different. He chose healing. He chose kindness. He chose fatherhood. He chose purpose. And most importantly, he chose to keep living without allowing fear to control him. One evening, Gabriel stood outside his parents' home, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where his story had begun. Christy was playing nearby. His parents sat together, and Samuel laughed with some of the children in the compound. Gabriel looked at his family and then toward the evening sky. For a moment, he remembered the 18-year-old boy who had left that same compound many years earlier, believing that hard work could solve every problem. Life had taught him otherwise. Some problems required courage. Some required help. Some required forgiveness. And some required the strength to walk away. Gabriel smiled quietly. Maybe he had not lost everything. Maybe, for a while, he had simply lost sight of himself. And perhaps everything he had survived had taught him that he was worth finding again. Sometimes the people we love can become the source of our deepest wounds. Sometimes, the peaceful home everyone sees from outside is hiding a pain nobody understands. Sometimes, the strongest looking person in the room is silently hoping that someone will notice that something is wrong. And sometimes, the darkest chapter is not the end of the story. It is simply the chapter before someone finally finds the courage to turn the page. For years, Gabriel had lived like the shadow of the man he used to be. But a shadow can only exist where there is still light. And at last, Gabriel had found his light again,